Hi, welcome back. Today's art history lecture will be on art of the Moche. This is a very exciting group of people that lived on the north coast of Peru, mostly during the early intermediate period. Today we'll look at some very impressive works of art that show selective naturalism. We'll look at works of art that express the Andean idea of uku, or the internal manifesting itself outwardly. And we'll also look at some of the most impressive metal work that we see in the Andean region. So we'll talk a little bit about the Moche in the north and the south coasts, some of their very impressive monumental Adobe brick architecture. We'll look at tombs, ceramics, and a little bit of their textiles and relationships with the neighboring Wari people. So for the most part, the Moche resided in the Puria Valley in the north and the Warme Valley in the south. The idea that scholars have about the Moche originally was that they were one unified state. However, most more recent archaeology and art history has shown that the Moche were probably either two separate states or different states that shared the same culture, yet were not totally unified like an empire. When you're doing research about the Moche, especially if you're reading any Spanish language literature, they might be referred to as the Mochica. This is the same group of people. So again, if you're doing some research, you might see them called the Mochica or the Mochica Indians, but we'll be calling them Moche for this lecture. So the Moche civilization flourished along the northern coasts and valleys of ancient Peru, in particular in the Chicama and Trujillo valleys, between about 1 CE and 800 CE. The Moche did spread eventually to cover an area from the Warme Valley in the south to the Puria Valley in the north, and they also extended their influence as far as the Chincha Islands, where they would gather bird guano or bird droppings for fertilizer. They would also seal hunt on those islands. The Moche territory was divided into two different language groups that were separate but related. So in the north, we have the Muchic language spoken, and we also have south of that the Kingon language. So these two areas display slightly different artistic work and architectural trends. So the Moche state can better be described as a loose confederacy rather than a single unified entity. The Moche were contemporary with the Nazca civilization, which we looked at last time. Nazca's a bit farther south, Paracas is up here. So they are a bit farther north, but they did exist at the same time. And they ended up conquesting surrounding territories, accumulating wealth and power necessary to establish themselves as one of the most unique and important early Andean cultures. The Moche expressed themselves in their art with high degree of aesthetics in examples of their naturalistic and vibrant murals. They created very interesting ceramics and very, very fine metal work that is, again, some of the most highly regarded in the Americas. So the capital city was known simply as Moche, and this is where we get the name for the civilization. It lies at the foot of the Cerro Blanco mountain, and it once covered an area of 300 hectares. The Moche are also famous for their Adobe pyramid-like mounds, which we will look at in just a moment. These will include multiple levels, access ramps, and slanted roofing. So here's a few archaeological sites. We'll look at a few of these today, including Sipan, Huaca el Brujo. So these are some references. So the Moche timeline, again, is approximately from 1 to 800 CE. So in the Common era, this places most of their work in the early intermediate period. So a lot of the work that we'll look at today will be from this time range, this 200 BCE to about 550 CE. Like Paracas and Nazca art, the art and religion of the Moche were initially influenced by the earlier Chavin culture, which existed from about 900 to 200 BCE, and it was influenced a bit later by the Chimu culture. We know that the Moche probably practiced a version of polytheism. We know that they had a pantheon of deities, but mostly what we know from the Moche comes directly from their artworks and their architecture and their tombs. So we don't have a written language for the Moche, unfortunately, but we do know that they seem to have a creator or sky god, which is sometimes known as Ayapayak, and they also seem to regard a moon goddess as well. And we do see the practices of Moche taking prisoners of war and performing sacrifices. And we do have archaeological evidence in the form of burials that back up these theories about their religious practices. So, we do know that they had very powerful male and female priests and priestesses. We'll check out some burials of some of these really important, powerful leaders kind of halfway through this lecture. So for the Moche regions, again, in the north of the Lambayeque Valley, we have the Muchik language, and then Kingong is spoken south of Lambayeque Valley. So these languages and these different spheres of the Moche culture do exist. I did want to start this lecture by looking at a rollout drawing of the Moche fine line sacrifice ceremony. This vessel is one of the vessels that has a strong narrative scene to it, and we will actually see references of these priests and priestesses as their real life selves in their burials. So here we have two registers. This is the vessel that it's drawn out on, and this is a fine line replica, all rolled out. So on the lower register, we seem to have victims that are tied up. They've got ropes around their necks, and they seem to be attended by warriors. These warriors seem to be releasing blood from the prisoners. And then in the upper register, we have these priests and priestesses wearing all of this very symbolic regalia, and they are carrying goblets and presenting it to this Lord of Sipan, or this main priest up at the top. These actual people, or at least their roles, have been located in the tombs at Sipan and also at San Jose de Moro. At San Jose de Moro, we have the regalia of this priestess. So these figures have been known as figures A, B, C, and D, these larger figures up on the top. And figure A is oftentimes referred to as the raid deity, the warrior priest, Ayapayak, or the fanged deity. We have figure B, which is known as the owl, figure C known as the priestess, and then figure D. And one very interesting thing that happens with this and our understanding of Moche culture is that in 1988, the excavation at the site of Sipan revealed the burials of elite people with accompanying objects and elements of dress identical to those represented in this illustration. So at the site of San Jose de Moro, the owl and the priestess were discovered. And at Huacacao Viejo, an elite female burial known as the Senora de Cao contained the objects of the dress of figure D. So we also have architecture and evidence of human sacrifice at Huaca de la Luna, which is a site we'll look at in just a moment. that really directly correspond to the iconography that's repeated in this theme. So the presentation theme has really played a crucial role in scholarship and link an iconographic representation and practice in ancient Moche society. And I have a link to Dumbarton Oaks in your syllabus. They do a great review of this. So keep that in mind, that it seems as though bloodletting rituals were something that was very important to Moche state religion. So let's jump into Moche architecture, and then we'll talk more about the characters in the sacrifice or presentations theme once we start looking at royal burials or elite burials. So Moche architecture is made up of monumental stepped adobe structures that include graduated levels, long sloping ramps, and small slanted roof structures on top of them. The small buildings that are on top of these monumental structures don't survive into the modern era. However, we do have a lot of illustrations that suggest architectural forms in Moche ceramics. So many of these include open fronts, pitched or slanted roofs. Again, this location is the desert coast of Peru, so they don't get a lot of rainwater. However, having roofs were helpful for shading from the sun and also protecting from when they did get El Nino rain events. And a lot of these roof lines were decorated with war clubs. This is an example of a ceramic vessel that's depicting an enlarged head between two storehouses. This one is decorated in typical negative painting. This one's from the early intermediate period, but we do get an idea of what these Moche structures may have looked like from their ceramics. This is another example that I found on JSTOR, which shows some of these decorative war clubs up on the top of this roof line. We have these pitched roof lines, looks like some open space for ventilation, and some geometric patterns along the sides of the houses. This is a stirrup spout vessel, which is a very popular type of vessel in Moche artwork. This is a reconstruction drawing of the Moche site of Sipan, located, or that's thought to have been built around the year 300 CE. Here we have these stepped pyramid-like structures, although these ones are a lot less like true pyramids compared to other pyramidal structures that we see in the Americas. These are mostly made out of, in some cases, over 100 million bricks to create these structures. And they're meant to replicate the mountains around them. So it's a way of creating an artificial mountain. They had stepped slopes and ramps going up, and then on top there would have been temples and other important types of buildings. This is a current view of the Moche site of Sipan. You can see that the adobe in the last almost 2,000 years has definitely eroded a lot. And so to the naked eye, it may just look like mountains. However, upon closer examination, these are discovered to be millions and millions of individual bricks that were laid by a large group of people to create these monumental, absolutely huge, impressive works of architecture. The burials that we'll look at when we look at our elite burials are located in this burial platform to the lower left. And this is another current view of the Moche site of Sipan. We also have very impressive architecture at the great locations of Huaca de la Luna and Huaca del Sol. Again, a Huaca is just a sacred place or a sacred monument. And this is the great Moche pyramid known as the Huaca del Sol. We don't know exactly what the Moche would have called these, but the Huaca del Sol is slightly bigger than the other one. So, you know, the sun's bigger than a moon, so you can remember Huaca del Sol means pyramid of the sun at Moche. Before the Spanish diverted the river in an attempt to find hidden gold, this truly monumental structure stood over 135 feet tall. So that's that's taller than a 13-story building, and it's also quite wide. The Spanish did know, they were aware that the Moche had gold and that they buried their elites with gold. And so unfortunately, a lot of our Moche metalwork has been looted, but we'll see at the case of Sipan that we do have gold work that was discovered in situ. However, the Spanish were trying to wash away this pyramid because they were hoping to find gold. And unfortunately, this is a bad thing for archaeology because we're unable to scientifically excavate this site. So we have evidence of ritual use and royal residence here, as well as burial that were evident functions in this Moche capital. This one is from the early intermediate period. And I also have Google Maps just to show you what this looks like today. So obviously there's a river valley here because we do have agriculture. And we've got the wakas. This is a natural mountain, but we can see that the wakas were created kind of to echo and replicate what those mountains look like. Again, these are made out of millions of mud bricks. The Waka del Sol was comprised of over 143 million bricks. So the Waka del Sol today has 4 tiers and stands 40 meters high. And it carried, it originally covered an area of about 340 by 160 meters. And each of these Adobe bricks was stamped with a maker's mark, which we'll look at in just a second. A ramp on the north side gives access to the summit, which is a platform in the form of a cross. The smaller structure is known today as Waka de la Luna. It stands 500 meters away and was built using about 50 million Adobe bricks. That one has 3 tiers and was decorated with friezes showing Moche mythology and also Moche rituals. The entire structure was once enclosed within a high Adobe brick wall. Both of these pyramids were constructed around 450 CE. They were originally brightly colored in red, yellow, and black, and they were used as an imposing setting to perform rituals and ceremonies. Unfortunately, the Spanish conquistadors later diverted the river Moche in order to break down the Waka del Sol and loot the tombs, which suggests that the Moche may have used it as a mausoleum for multiple generations. So Moche agriculture really benefited from all of these systems of canals, reservoirs, and aqueducts. The land in this area around the capital of Moche could support a population of about 25,000, which was pretty good size for that time in history. Here are some examples of the individual pieces of Adobe brick that were used to build the Waka del Sol. Here we have the various markers. And these identifying patterns prove that the work units documented the Moche subjects' contributions to the 143 million bricks that were laid in the mountain-like structure. So one theory is that each maybe community of people in the Moche state were responsible for providing labor as a form of a tax. And that they accounted for their labor by stamping their bricks with their own community's chop. And so that would be a way of keeping track of the different folks who were contributing their labor towards the state building. So again, whenever we see really large works of monumental architecture in history, we know that this took a really large cohesive effort of people. So this is showing that there's some sort of unifying religion or political system that is bringing people together to either willingly create these huge works of architecture or, are kind of forcing labor to come together and create these really large structures. This is the Waka de la Luna. This is the smaller of the two pyramidal structures located at the site of Moche. This is the view of Waka de la Luna looking east with the Moche ruins in the foreground and the Cerro Blanco mountain in the background. So this is a mountain in the background. What we're looking at is this kind of very eroded Adobe brick pyramid structure in the foreground. So Waka de la Luna is referred to as the Temple of the Moon. And it over the course of centuries, unfortunately, has deteriorated. We've lost a lot of parts of their structural and decorative elements. However, we do have some regions from the Huaca de la Luna that remain. So let's take a look at some of those. This is the artist rendering of the platforms and plazas at the top of Huaca de la Luna. We'll take a look at some of these murals here in just a moment. So this is a fanged deity that we see repeated throughout Moche artwork, and especially in the Huaca de la Luna. This one is interpreted as perhaps being the half-man, half-jaguar decapitator god, which is, he's so called because he's often represented holding a vicious-looking sacrificial knife in one hand and the severed head of a sacrificial victim in the other. This god is also sometimes depicted as a gigantic spider figure ready to strike the lifeblood from its victims. And we do know that these sacrificial practices are backed up by archaeological finds, such as those found at the foot of the Huaca de la Luna, where there are 40 skeletons of men under the age of 30 that show evidence they were mutilated and thrown from the top of the pyramid. So these bones of the skeletons display cut marks. They show that the limbs were ripped out of their sockets. Jaw bones are missing from some of the severed skulls. And the bodies that they discovered lie above soft ground that were probably caused by heavy El Nino rains, which suggests that the sacrifices were probably done in order to offer the Moche gods something in order to, ask for these environmental catastrophes to stop happening. We also have evidence, which we'll see when we look at San Jose de Moro, of ceremonial goblets that have been discovered which contain traces of human blood, and of course some of the costume-like elements of these priests and priestesses. So here's that frontal-faced fanged deity that we see repeated over and over again. We also have these kind of snake-like motifs repeating zigzagged around the edges. So these are murals on the Huaca de la Luna with that wide-eyed fanged shamanic face with these interlocked snakes. These bulging eyes and visions of snakes are typical signs of shamanic trance. So this probably either depicts that decapitator god, or it could be a reference of shamanic trance. This is what it looks like on Google Maps. You can see they've protected some of these areas. You can see all the mud bricks that they used to create these structures, and we're in that kind of patio platform area up at the top right now. Here they are again. Some of them are in better shape than others. We also have this mural of the Moche myths at Huaca de la Luna as well, where we have a lot of human figures and plants, agricultural symbols, stars, and theogenic plants, and it's quite colorful. And it's a very interesting mural that we have at the Huaca de la Luna. This one's not in your textbook, but I do think it's interesting and noteworthy enough to include in this presentation. The Huaca de la Luna also has a lot of these spider-like figures repeated throughout it, as well as these images of bound captives that are tied up and nude. So we have this multiple processions, again, of spiders and captives. The captives being sacrificed is something that we see evidenced in those bodies that were discovered at the bottom of the pyramid. So let's talk a little bit about some of the themes that we see in Moche public art. So of course, with those gigantic pyramidal forms, we definitely have kind of some references of intimidation. Those are very impressive. They, again, in their very worn out state, they literally still look like mountains. But of course, back in the day, they would have been brightly painted, covered with large buildings and structures. So there's definitely a bit of intimidation that we see in Moche public architecture. But in Moche public art, we see humans, transformational shamanic beings. We have sacrifice scenes, and we have archaeological evidence to back up the theories of these sacrificial practices. So this is a drawing of the Panyamarka mural E. This shows a portion of the sacrifice ceremony featuring the priestess at the left. We have attendants and victims at the center, and the bowl of goblets in the lower right down here. And these may have been offerings for the Lord of Sipan to the left. At San Jose de Moro, archaeologists have actually found the actual priestess that was interred with this kind of tasseled headdress. And this is from the early intermediate period. We'll take a look at that here soon. All right, so let's talk about some of those burials and sacrifice that we see correlating with these characters from the so-called sacrifice scene. So since 1987, Walter Ava and Christopher Donnan have found the burials of nearly every figure in the sacrifice scene. So at Tomb 1 in Sipan, we have the remnants of an individual with the regalia of the Lord of Sipan. At Tomb 3 Sipan, we have the Old Lord. At Tomb 2 in Sipan, we have the Owl Priest. At Tomb 5 in Sipan, we have the Priestess, and we also have the Priestess in San Jose de Moro and Huacacao Viejo as well. But first, let's take a look at Sipan. So Sipan included 13 burials and all of their associated artifacts. This is really important because this is the first time that we're really seeing large amounts of Moche metalwork, including gold and silver work, found in situ or in their original place. This is very important because it helps archaeologists associate specific objects with the buried individuals. So it gives us an idea of the identity of the original owner or wearer of these artifacts. So the largest burial was devoted to an individual that the archaeologists named the Lord of Sipan. He was interred with 451 objects of gold, silver, copper, and turquoise. And the quality of these objects associated with Sipan burials is very superb. It would have required a massive specialized workforce to create. So this is what the Tomb 1 at Sipan looked like. We can see shells, pink pectoral necklace. We can see the ear ornaments here. And it's dated to about 300 AD. Again, it was discovered by Walter Ava in 1987, and the regalia of Tomb 1 correlates with the individual receiving the cup in the sacrifice scene, also known as the Lord of Sipan. Let's take a look a little bit more closely at what was happening. And again, this is that super large Adobe pyramidal platform structures at Sipan, with the burials being over here at that bottom left corner. So this is a reconstruction of what the tomb of the Lord of Sipan may have originally looked like before it was, a little bit flattened over time. We see that the Lord is buried with these gold back flaps and these headdresses, attendant figures, many different works of ceramics, and also those 451 objects of metal and turquoise. So let's take a look at some of the iconography associated with this individual, and we'll see what of this iconography matches up with what Walter Ava found in Tomb 1 at Sipan. So this is that main figure. We see he has kind of this scary fanged mouth. He has these rays coming out of his headdress. He's wearing this kind of knife edge shaped headdress. He's wearing these back flaps with tassels. And he is receiving this cup from the Owl Priest. He also has a spotted dog buried at his side, which is interesting because we actually find a spotted dog buried with this individual. This is a reconstruction of the regalia that was found buried in Tomb 1 at Sipan, and let's take a look at it a little bit more closely. So we have the crescent-shaped headdress ornament and the back flap that corresponds to the warrior priest depiction. Thank you to Smart History for this image. So the back flap was one of the things that actually did get looted out of here. It was looted in 1987 and was trafficked out of the country around 1995. And then in 1997, an undercover FBI agents purchased it in a sting operation that took place in a rest stop along the New Jersey Turnpike. In 1998, the FBI held a ceremony to officially return this back flap to Peru, and it is now located in the Museo de la Nación in Lima. So these items excavated at the Sipan tombs are housed near Sipan in Chiclayo, and I actually went there when I was like 13. Fun fact. All right, so there's like a whole FBI story about recovering this back flap and bringing it back to Peru. So if you're thinking about writing a movie about stolen artifacts, there's some material for you. So let's talk a little bit about Moche metalwork. The Moche were very highly skilled in their metallurgy. So depletion gilding is something that we see the Moche utilizing. They're also utilizing soldering techniques. They're also hammering some of this gold from the back to create these flat yet three-dimensional effects. So the metalworker in depletion gilding will bathe the finished work of metal into an acid bath. This removes any non-gold metals like copper, and it leaves only a thin layer of pure gold visible. It's really this concept of uku kind of comes out, which means what is inside will be revealed externally. So it allows the metal workers to use an alloy, so mixing gold with something else to create the work of art. This will make it a little bit more thick and sturdy during the creation. And then at the very end, the acid bath will remove all of the cheaper metals and only leave the gold. So it's really showing that they are interested in revealing that higher quality metal. So this is a bell from Sipan Tomb 1. This one shows the characteristics of Ayapayak, or also known as the Decapitator. This is a character or deity that seems to be repeated throughout Moche iconography, and he is noteworthy because he's holding onto a tumi, or a ceremonial knife blade. So you see that kind of curved ceremonial knife he's holding in one hand and a decapitated head in the other side. He's usually shown in a frontal pose with kind of this scary, grimaced face. And it looks as though he's also wearing a necklace made out of skulls. So he's a pretty scary character. This is what they looked like before they were cleaned up. This really shows that the character who was buried here, or the individual who's buried here, was a formidable warrior. Here's another work of metalwork from Sipan Tomb 1. This is a banner. This one's made out of gilt copper, and I really like this one because it shows you some of the three-dimensionality of Moche metalwork. So they're working with a lot of flat gold, but they're layering it, they're attaching it, they have like beads and bells that can swing around independently, and they're also kind of making a mosaic out of it. So peanuts became a luxury good in Moche culture, and we actually have a lot of artwork examples that show peanuts, vessels in the shape of peanuts, shamans playing flutes that look like peanuts. And here we have this really impressive necklace that's made out of gold and silver. So half of the beads are made out of gold, the other half is made out of silver, and the longest of these beads is almost 4 inches long. So this would have been a very large necklace. And what we really see with this use of balance of gold and silver is this Andean idea of Aini, or that balancing of different things coming together and creating a whole. So we have that kind of duality. We see it sometimes with gender. In this case, we're seeing it with gold and silver, these two very precious metals that the Moche masterfully worked with. We also have some really beautiful ear spools that were worn by the so-called Lord of Sipan. These ones include deer. These ones are made with gold, silver, shell, and turquoise. And it's noteworthy that turquoise isn't actually mined in the Moche region, and this would have actually had to have been imported. We also see this beautiful work with these little beads. And these are small enough to be ear spools. This is another ear spool that is very incredible for its three-dimensionality. This one is a warrior, and this warrior is actually wearing very similar attire to what the actual individual was wearing who was buried here. So we see this kind of toomey or ceremonial shaped knife blade headdress. We have the necklace that seems to be made out of skulls. Here you can see the three-dimensionality of it next to this representation of the Lord of Sipan himself. So there does seem to be a strong correlation between this central warrior figure and the Lord who was actually buried here. Again, this one is also made out of gold, silver, shell, and turquoise. And I love that they have these movable parts in their metalwork. So we have the little necklace that's hanging off of the body. We have the nose ring that is swinging freely from the nose of the little gold individual. We also have the inlay of attendants flanking on either side, and the ear spool characters are also wearing ear spools, which is just incredible. This is an example of a spider necklace bead. Again, Ayapayak, that Andean deity is oftentimes associated with spiders. So this could be a depiction of that same deity. But you can see this one is only 8.3 centimeters in diameter, but there's quite a lot of detail going on here. So we have the wires creating the spider web, the spider legs, and we have this face of probably a god or a shaman on the back side of it, of the back side of the spider. And then the back side of the bead itself kind of has these swirling serpentine like features. All right, the next sacred burial we'll look at is San Jose de Moro. Here we have the burial of the priestess, or we have iconography that matches up with the depiction of the priestess here. This is where San Jose de Moro is located. So this is the drawing of the Panamarca mural E, which shows a portion of the sacrifice ceremony featuring the priestess. So a couple of noteworthy things we see here are these big tasseled hair pieces coming off of a headdress, these long tassels, and these serpent-like kind of braided features coming off of her. And this is the actual burial. This copper has kind of turned green over time. But originally, we would have had these copper tassels and this large copper face and these limbs decorating the outside of this coffin. The body discovered inside was that of a woman. And the tassels that are on the outside of this coffin strongly correlate with these tassels that we see on the priestess who is presenting the goblet in the sacrifice ceremony. We also have examples of actual goblets that were discovered in her burial at San Jose de Moro, and scientific exploration and testing has showed remnants of human blood inside of these cups. So we know that these cups actually carried human blood, and whether or not that blood was presented or drunk or whatever was done with it, we're not sure, but we do know that actual human blood was collected in some of these vessels. We also have another example of a very impressive high status female burial at Huacacao Viejo. She's commonly called the Lady of Cow or the Senora de Cow. She was buried at this impressive platform, stepped pyramidal shaped building. And this included a sumptuous burial of a woman in her 20s. Her burial accessories include ceremonial war clubs, ceramic vessels, and gold and silver nose rings, which prior to this discovery had commonly been believed by scholars to be only things that were associated with male prestige and men in power. However, this is a burial of a woman who is buried with all of these ceremonial war instruments. Her skin is actually pretty well mummified, and her skin bears tattoo imageries of serpents, spiders, and also aquatic motifs. So this is a close-up of her hand. This is one of the facades at Huacacao Viejo, which is located right here. We have a stepped facade that includes nude captives that are probably being brought into a procession. We also have images of the so-called decapitator god at Huacacao Viejo, also presumed to be Ayapayac. And again, this is a reference from Sipan of probably the same character being depicted in these two different works of art. And Smart History has a really good video, so I'm attaching this to Canvas about the Senora de Cao. So that will go into a little bit more detail, her burial. This is the ceremonial enclosure place where the tomb of the Lady of Cao was found. She was also buried with quite a lot of ceramics. This vessel included a representation of the owl on the surface, which is kind of related to the sacrifice ceremony. I'll skip briefly through the ceramics that were found at the tomb of the Lady of Cao. She was buried in a very large funerary bundle and had a companion buried with her as well. Here's a cross-section of the different layers here of that bundle, and some of the vases that were buried with her as well. I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit. Here are the nose rings that she was buried with. So prior to the discovery of the Lady of Cao's burial, it was thought that only men in Moche society wore nose rings, because for the most part in art, that's what we see, is that most of the people who wear nose rings are male. However, she was buried with a large number of these very impressive nose rings, some of them including images of crawfish, birds, terrestrial animals. This one seems to show Ayapayac, or the decapitator god again. And many of them are created in this dual gold and silver mixed metal approach. This is a close-up of the reconstructed face that scientists in Peru have managed to reconstruct using forensic scans and analysis of her remains. Here you can see some of the tattoos. This is what her face probably would have looked like in real life. And here's a close-up of those tattoos that show a lot of the magic symbols of serpents and spiders along her arm, along her fingers. This discovery was important not only because she correlates with figure D in the sacrifice ceremony, but also it challenged the belief that only men held really high positions in ancient Moche society. Peru's Minister of Culture, Salvador del Solar, said that the reconstruction had revealed that we are privileged to announce this strange combination of the future and the past. Technology has allowed us to see the face of a political and religious leader from a culture from the past. And that's a quote of him from BBC. So this shows us that women were very much involved, at least high-ranking in many ways in Moche society. Whether she was just a religious leader or a political leader or both, we're not sure. Again, the dead do not bury themselves, so we're not entirely sure if the prestige that she had in death matched the prestige that she had in life, but it is quite likely. We also have this stirrup spout vessel that was found with the burial of La Senora de Cao, which shows a woman curer wearing this characteristic cowl, attending a mother and her sick daughter, which may indicate that the Senora de Cao had healing powers as well as political ones. All right, I'm gonna do a part 2 for this video, so I'll do Moche ceramics next time. I'm running out of time right now to record, so make sure to come back for part 2, Moche ceramics, which are very, very impressive.